About to go.
Oh, I thought you
There
said
we go.
were.
Now we are.
Now we're live. Okay.
It takes the program a couple of seconds to catch up with us, because we're just such a fast moving group. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the Weekly Roundtable. I am one of your co-hosts, Frank Johnson, co-founder of the Liberty First Foundation and host of the ever popular YouTube firearm show, The Range Report. To my far right is Michael Marshall, co-founder of the Liberty First Foundation and co-host of the show. Dead center between us, Michael Vaz, Dragon of the Bronx, New York's only true independent journalist. Jan Raines, our alternative lifestyle specialist, joins us tonight. And from the great state of West Virginia is candidate Trey Ewing, who's going to fill us in on his candidacy, his proposals, his positions, and everything else that comes along the line. So if you got a question, jump in the chat, type it in. We'll relay the message. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. Not bad. Not bad.
If I'm energetic, it's because I just had like 4 cups of coffee.
Well, actually, that's what I'm about to do. Actually, I'll be right back. I got to get my coffee so we can keep going with the show.
Well, I figure I'll be crashing at about the 9:45 minute, so wanted to jump in. You guys have all been talking in the green room before I popped in, so you guys have had an opportunity to speak with and meet Trey for a while. I have not done so yet. Trey, thank you for joining us this week. How's everything going?
Yeah, it's going fine. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak with y'all and just get out there and hopefully support good positions.
All right. Well, we're happy to have you here with us this week. And if there's any topics or questions that you would like to touch on individually, please reach out. Let us know. We'll touch on them. Otherwise, we're going to grill you with some very serious questions.
Yeah, that's fine. I hopefully have some good answers.
All right. On a hot dog, do you prefer mustard or ketchup?
Yeah, well, it really neither. I've never been a fan of anything on the eat the hot dog plant. It's a pretty weird answer.
How are we going to get nice photo ops of you at a baseball game? America's pastime with America's favorite handheld food. For God's sake, Trey. The correct answer was mustard. But that's the point.
Now that Frank has lulled you into a feeling of security and safety, the rest of us will ask the real questions.
Oh, stop. I ask real questions. I just like to put people at ease to let people know that, although we do touch on very serious subject matter and we do take everything very seriously, at heart, we're all lighthearted individuals who just want the best for our country. We want the best candidates to be representing us, and we always want to, make sure that everybody who's here is comfortable and always feels welcome should they ever want to return. So,
yeah, in other words, I'm the one who pisses everyone off.
Yeah, Vass asks the.
I do too.
Well, Vass asks the questions that gets people pissed off. Michael Marshall brings them down deep into the woods to get to the minutia of it, and I try to bring the lightheartedness of it. Jan, she comes along and she says, "Okay, this is what's going on in my state because this is what matters to me." Jan is our local homegrown expert, so. Me, I just try to add levity to things.
That's true. That's true. Jan is the heart. She's the spirit of it all.
Aw, gosh, you guys.
Well, plus last week I was told that they don't really know what I do here. We'll take it from that. Now, I'm just a resident gun guy. I'm the resident Second Amendment guy. I'm the Yeah, I'm the guy who overanalyzes political thought to try and figure out what people are thinking before they say what's on their mind. I'm the guy who tries to figure out the strategies that they're playing. These Vass is more or less our political expertise person. He understands what goes on in the smoke-filled rooms of K Street, where all of the deals are, hit the rubber and all the deals are made.
Yeah. Speaking of which, before we go into that, perhaps Trey, take a moment to just, for the audience, not just in West Virginia, but across America and around the world that will be able to see this. This is not only going out with the Liberty First Foundation, it's also on my site. No sound bites allowed. We're simulcasting. So I know my show in particular reaches India, Japan, Sweden, Peru, Canada, just off the top of my head, some of the, and the United Kingdom, of course. So that's just a couple of places that people are learning about you. So tell them something about you.
Yeah, sure, of course. I really got into politics around, I guess, 2016. I've always been a conservative, Christian, but really around Trump and then going forward, seeing the direction of everything. That's whenever I got really involved in. And 2020, I actually got involved with the local party and some candidates, supporting candidates, and in 2020, we flipped some seats to some of the campaigns helped out there. Some good actual conservatives there, Republicans split seats from Democrats. In 2022, I ran for office for the first time. I was elected to the county executive committee and the state executive committee in West Virginia, the Greenbrier County, and the state committee for the 10th Senate District. The executive committee, I think West Virginia is pretty unique. I don't think a lot of places do this, but actually the leadership of the party is publicly elected in West Virginia. It's a little weird, but we have public meetings. We try to push conservative values and advocate for a constitution, conservatives, and try to reach out to younger people, and then also really look out and try to defend local government from some of the crazy stuff that tries to infiltrate it. Move on a couple years. I'm the treasurer of the State Federation of Young Republicans in West Virginia. I'm on the board of a pregnancy crisis center as well, and I've decided to run for the House of Delegates here in the 46th district of West Virginia because I respect the guy that's currently in there right now. He is a Republican, but I have different views on some of the more serious issues. And I felt that I was asked to do it, and I prayed about it. I felt that it is necessary to put my name in there, and I've been campaigning for that. I'm pro-life, support biblical values. I'm in favor of supporting and protecting the Second Amendment, even expanding it, getting rid of some of the restrictions that have been placed on it. And I think it mainly sums up where I'm at and what I've done.
Okay.
One thing I would like to point out about Trey is he's a young man, and I think it's awesome the things that he has already done for our county.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. I have a question to start off with, which is kind of interesting because, Trey, when I went to your website, which is the Trey Ewing for West Virginia, and looking at your website, one thing that caught me right off the bat, and I was a little bit concerned about, matter of fact, hang on one second. I want to put it on the screen so everyone can see it. There it is. So there's your website. I'm at the correct site, right?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to double check that because there's something that stands out to me immediately. And I talked to many candidates across the country in every kind of race. What I don't see is your positions. Now, you've mentioned you're a conservative. You've mentioned that you believe in the Second Amendment, that you have strong feelings about education. I obviously want to ask you about energy as well, but I'm not seeing any of that on the website. Can you tell me, why did you make that choice?
Well, it's not necessary that I made a choice not to include that. It's actually more of I haven't sat down and been as thorough as I'd like to be on some of the issues yet to publish that. I've been using a lot of the time that I would spend on something like that, going through and answering some of the questionnaires from some of these organizations that do endorsements, things like that. And I've been out meeting people. But I'm actually working on that, and I do plan to get that up there as we get closer to the election and people start to research candidates. So it's not that I made a decision not to put that out there, but that it kind of dropped the ball and haven't got to it yet, to be honest with you. But do have a little bit on there, like you said. There's a paragraph about why I'm running, and I do get into some of the things. It's not quite as thorough as it needs to be. I completely agree with you. I'm working on it, but I'd be happy to answer any questions about the particular issues or what I think on it.
No, absolutely. But I know it's something that people will notice, and for especially those who vote in primaries, especially, and you are in a primary race. So they're going to say, why is that? Many of them will say the same thing I did. That was a choice. So now they have the opportunity to know, okay, no, it's not that you chose not to. It's something that's coming. So that should happen before the May primary.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely before then. Hopefully, I'm aiming to round out all of that sort of back end stuff by the March 1st. So that way, from March 1st to May 14th with the election, I'm going to be out just meeting people and just really doing what needs to be done to introduce myself to people. My goal is to introduce myself and make a connection with every voter that can vote in this election, but that might be a little bit of a long shot. But so I might have to settle with a little less than everyone. But I'm really trying to start that on March 1st. So we're looking at probably the next week and a half, and there'll probably be something with positions up there.
No problem. Thank you for having the answer there and being direct about it, because sometimes people don't like to admit it's not easy to. I've run campaigns myself. I've run for Congress. You can't get everything always up instantly day one, unless you have a couple $1 million coming from political parties, which would lead me to my second question: funding. How are you doing in terms of that?
Well, I'm doing okay. I believe that I'm about even with my opponent. Well, it's a little complicated. My opponent, he had, I respect him. He's a former Democrat. He was a Democrat legislator. He was beaten in 2020.
Yeah.
And he has about $10,000 left over, but he hasn't raised any since then. I've raised about, I think, 5,000 or so, plus I self-funded everything up until this point. So I have about, well, I purchased signs on that 5,000 at this point, so I haven't self-funded everything. But everything other than that, it's self-funded, and I really, there's a long list of people I have to call for fundraising. But just be honest with you, first time I've ever asked money for myself. I've fundraised a lot for other people and good organizations, but I've been a little weird and saying I need to get over it and actually just start making some of these calls. But fundraising wise, I don't think there's going to be any issue of coming up short and not being able to purchase something that I'd like to. There isn't as many media opportunities in Southern West Virginia as some of the more bigger areas. They're really the only thing is mailers and signs. Those are your big things, and it really isn't that much whenever you look at the number of voters in the district.
Well, you're not in a media market like LA, New York, Chicago, so the prices are substantially lower. I understand that. It's always important, though, for people to know that you are competitive, that you can raise money, and that you can get out there with commercials and other media, just like the other candidates. And that's reasonable. You're within, compared to an incumbent, that's a normal kind of amount to start with. So no real concern there. But again, I tend to ask questions to try and understand the nature of your race.
Yeah, of course.
Let me take a moment to let Mike, I'm sure you got a couple of questions. I have plenty more, but go ahead, guys. I don't want to hog all the beginning.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the issues that are in your district, primarily what you are running on as your platform?
Yeah, sure. Of course, there's a couple different types of issues, especially whenever you're looking at a statewide race, a little different from federal. But of course, the bipartisan issues, the stuff in West Virginia, some of the issues we have is our CPS system isn't where it should be at all. But that's really an issue that I hope everybody can agree on and we can work on. So some of the actual real big issues that are controversial that I differ from on my opponent is I'm pro-life. That's one of the big three. I have about three that I really caused me to decide to run. I'm pro-life. I believe life begins at conception. My opponent has in the past supported taxpayer-funded abortion, and I personally, like I said, I'm on the board of a pregnancy crisis center. I just can't support that personally, and I felt being in the position I'm in, I probably need to do something about that, especially after I was asked if I'd be interested and be willing to step up and do that. I'm also a big supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm pro-gun. My opponent has called for gun control just in a broad sense. And whenever he was in there, he voted against some bills that would have strengthened some of the protections on the Second Amendment. And then the last one is education. I am very, very concerned about the state of our public education, not just in West Virginia, but you look at states that, like Virginia, I mean, they're doing even worse, unfortunately. What's being taught to children is, to be honest with you, it's unacceptable. And I've seen it, and I'm working on even when the time that I have, I try to research into that, even some of the stuff happening in our public universities, and it's really bad. Even in a state like West Virginia, where we have stopped a lot of the crazy stuff, or public universities that we give them taxpayer funds, they're busing students across state lines and they have abortions with our money. And it's a really disgusting thing to me. And I felt that if I had the opportunity to do something about it, I wanted to. And that's not even to get into the CRT stuff that's being taught in the public schools and things like that. But those are my big three. Of course, I'm, like I said, a constitutional conservative. I mean, there's other issues that are just as important. There's issues that in the state legislature, like immigration, that really there's not much that we can do. But of course, that's a big issue as well. But those are personally the big three that if I am elected, those are what I'd be very focused on personally.
May I piggyback on that, Mike? So I understand you believe life at conception. You're against abortion. We need a clarification in that, because many politicians see a subset of that, and it's been an issue in many states. Do you believe in zero abortions under all circumstances, or do you fall under what many people, even in red states, even many conservatives say, with the exceptions of course, the life of the mother, not the health or well-being, which is an end around, but the life of the mother, and or extreme medical emergencies, and of course incest. Is that the exception, or do you say none whatsoever?
Well, of course, I don't support it in the case of rape and incest. I do believe life begins at conception. Whenever you start getting into the life of the mother, that's a very complex medical question.
Yes.
Because of course, some people, they say that you touched on it there a little bit, the health and the well-being of the mother. It's not. So you really have to get very specific there. But if it is a situation, I don't have a big background in medicine, but there are certain situations where there is nothing that can be done. Mm-hmm. And it's regardless of what you do, that both will die. In that case, it's not necessarily, I think that we lose the fight on this whenever we start using terms like abortion to refer to that, because it's not necessarily the same thing. It's not even the same medical procedure. Whenever it is those certain types of pregnancies where both would die regardless, the mother and the child. And I think that whenever we start referring to it as abortion, we almost lose that battle. Because I don't see that as an abortion. That is to protect the life of the mother, and it's at that point a medical procedure that is very tragic. But it's just not the same thing. And of course, that like I said, it should be different in law, of course. And if it's to protect the life of the mother, it should be legal. But other than that, I mean, actual abortions, I don't support it all. I'm completely pro-life.
Okay. So in terms of it being an elective service, if it's something being used as a means of birth control, there's your line very definitively there. But as most states and most individuals accept across America, with those exceptions of health and rape and incest, you fall in line with the majority of American people. Okay. It's just something that
Well, health,
isn't
rape
usually
and
asked.
incest, I wouldn't support
Right.
an abortion in that case.
No,
I have a
thank you for
question
that
regarding
clarification.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, and I'm going to be totally upfront here. As a person who was molested as a young teenager, I think it should be my right to have an abortion. Same with a rape victim. Now, I know many people, including myself, who chose to have the child. But the conflict that it caused me got me into drugs and all kinds of other stuff for most of my adult life. So I have to disagree with you there, Trey.
Yeah.
And
I can respect that. I didn't know that it happened. I'm sorry to hear that, and I see your point in that. It is it's not a good situation at all.
It's not, and that's why I say I am pro-life, but I agree that under rape, molestation, and the life of the mother, that we should have that choice.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I'm not trying to say, no, you're wrong, you can't think that way, but I think you should broach the subject a little bit more because of people like me.
I think let me interject here. Okay, and I can understand exactly where you're coming from, Jan. But I also think that there needs to be, in those situations, we need to look at, okay, what is the actual mental implications of the person requesting an abortion for rape, incest, etc. Because there is varying mental implications and that occur. Okay, for somebody that it is severely mentally damaging, then yeah, I can understand that because that child is always a reminder. Other people, it's not going to be as severe of a mental issue for them.
Well,
okay, in that case, I can see pushing forward. So I think with, how do I say it, proper counseling and so forth, not just an outright yes, it's the right of the woman to, because that starts getting into other things where we start making these exceptions. I do think that there needs to be some more to it than just automatically saying the woman has the right to end that pregnancy. Okay, I think there needs to be some deal that does show.
Mike, before we get into, I know we've had this discussion on the show many times. And of course, this is a hot button issue. There are many nuances to it.
Oh, yeah, there is.
Even later in the show, I hope to bring up about what's happening in Albany, Alabama. And so that's kind of with that. But I want to focus, Trey, on, we're trying to understand you. We'll have our debates internally or on the show, and you're more than happy to join in on that, Trey. But let's ask a couple more questions. Let me switch up a little bit to something a little bit different because, well, let me go to, I want to talk about DEI, which is an issue I see on your website. I've seen that you've mentioned it. But before I get to that, obviously energy is critical for West Virginia. And the question about renewable energy is critical to West Virginia. And I know this is a question from, we saw Grace just asked a question in the comments saying, coal jobs ever coming back to the state? Well, not just are coal jobs coming back, as a member of the state house, how would you be looking at renewable energy? Are you looking at nuclear, or is it only solar and wind? Is that meant to replace oil, gas? Where is your stance on that?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'm fully in favor of oil, natural gas, coal. I don't think that we should be putting the sort of restrictions that we have on them. I'm not necessarily an expert on exactly what we do to tax them, but I know there's also some taxes that are killing them, and I'd be fully in favor of supporting coal jobs coming back to West Virginia. Of course, though, unfortunately, that falls underneath federal. If it's going to come down to who's the president, and that's really going to be a big question there. However, whenever we talk about what we incentivize inside the state, you mentioned nuclear. I believe nuclear, of course, we've come a long way, and it's a lot safer now. Really, I believe it's probably one of the most safe. I would support that, and I believe that we have moved in that direction already in West Virginia, and we've allowed nuclear plants to begin construction. I don't know what the status on that is, but really, I think what's best is just allowing a free market. Of course, what happens in that free market, it would be, of course, natural gas, oil, coal winning out, and nuclear, of course. But I don't believe in. I've seen some people call for banning of renewable stuff, which no. I believe in a free market in that, and I believe that we shouldn't be putting the restrictions that have been put on some of our jobs because it's killing our economy. It's making us non-competitive in the global sense, and it just really is based on, in my opinion, not so great science. But overall, I'd support a free market and support bringing coal jobs back. If it was up to me, I'd do. If it is somehow brought to the state legislature, I'd be fully in support of it. But it really more than likely will be federal.
Okay, so you just gave me a nice segue. Okay, should it be controlled by the federal constitutionally?
Controlled by the Constitution in what sense?
Constitutionally, should coal mining be regulated by the federal government?
Oh, okay. I see. Well, no, I believe it's probably a state issue generally.
Okay, so what steps are you going to take to start bringing that back as a state issue?
Well, and that's a good question. I believe that, of course, as one delegate, you really there's. I guess it might be better to answer this in saying what I see. I've thought about this a lot, and I've talked to a lot of people, specifically on something similar with education. At what point do you say no and don't allow them to go any farther? It has to be a point where enough people can agree to where you'd have enough people on your side to do anything. Of course, if it was up to me, we'd say no instantly. Unfortunately, there's more politics that play than that. And
absolutely,
if I am elected, being a freshman delegate, there's not, just to be honest with you, I mean, there's not a lot somebody can do in their first term. Whenever it's something that would be that big. That, of course, as well, is more of the way the state government set up, that probably even fall underneath a board of public works where the attorney general would sue the federal government. So it's a complicated issue. However, I do believe you're correct. It's something eventually you have to say no.
And that's where you can actually, even as a freshman, you can get the conversation started.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree on that. And there are conversations like that happening in West Virginia. I know that, but I'm fully in favor of saying no at a certain point. How that plays out legally, I'm not I don't know, but I do agree. Something has to be done.
We're seeing it play out legally in Texas.
Well, that's true. And I'm fully in favor of that as well. I'm hoping that we continue to stand strong there. And I think we will.
Okay.
So good. Okay. Poverty. West Virginia is ranked third in the nation with the highest poverty rates. At what are some of the programs that you, even as a freshman, are going to try to get implemented to help turn around the poverty rates in West Virginia?
Well, in West Virginia, the reason for it actually, programs wouldn't help it. It actually would make it worse. The reason we're at where we're at, in my opinion, and I've looked into this and understand the history of it. We were ran by Democrats for 90 years.
Mm-hmm.
They did all these social programs, government jobs, minimum wage raises. All you go straight down the line.
Right.
What really we need, in my opinion, is we need to cut taxes, which we have. We are actually running a surplus year after year in West Virginia. We're taking more money than what we need, which, constitutionally, you look at that, it's not right. It isn't right. We shouldn't be taking the money for some of these things anyway, and we definitely shouldn't be taking more than we need. So immediately you cut taxes. You cut taxes and you reduce government spending, especially waste. And that right there, the money goes back into the hands of business owners. It creates good jobs. It encourages businesses that are big and actual good businesses, manufacturing, to come place plants in West Virginia, which we have, of course, rivers that there have been companies looking at to establish shipping through the rivers. We have a lot of good natural resources, and it's starting to pick up. And we used to be number one. I know you said we're third now, but Republicans have only controlled the state for a couple of years at this point, and that's
right.
The direction we're going. Is the direction we need to keep going, and if we keep going down that way, we allow free markets, and we actually cut spending and allow people to get better, high-paying jobs. That's going to be the solution to it. It's going to take some time. It's not, it's probably not as popular politically because you're not saying you get something for free. You're not telling people that, but it's the correct answer, and that's what truly we need to do. That's the direction we're going.
Let me follow up on that for a moment, because you talked about high-paying jobs, and a current item that is running around. It's in the Senate right now, United States Federal Senate, which is, I believe it was S-2788, which is the increasing the minimum wage to a living wage of $50 an hour. Well, I know, made me laugh when I first heard about it too. No, but there is members of our federal government who are trying to advocate for a $50 minimum wage. More often, though, we tend to hear either the living wage of $25 an hour or the mantra across most cities, and here in New York State and Colorado and Washington State, we've heard about the $15 minimum wage. Either that or universal basic income, UBI. Now, Trey, I'm not sure are you familiar with what UBI is?
I am.
Okay. So looking at, these are the two main counter arguments for increasing pay for the average worker. Let me ask you, where do you stand on, or do you support UBI and or either a living or minimum wage at least of $15 an hour?
Well, no, that's the short answer. However, of course, the real minimum wage is $0 an hour. And that's what, unfortunately, when you talk about poverty, that's what you're seeing. Mm-hmm. Whenever you start raising the minimum wage, jobs disappear, or even just having the minimum wage at a certain point in general, there aren't as many jobs. And that's the true minimum wage. It's zero. And if you truly want to take the economy and turn it around, you don't do things like that. You encourage economic growth, which is going to be by letting business owners keep the money and reinvest. So, and then of course, universal basic income, that's even more radical. I mean, you can go down so many routes on that, but that doesn't, it doesn't make any sense to me for more reasons than even raising the minimum wage. It enables people that don't want to work, which isn't something we should be doing. We should be, if there's a mental problem there, we should be helping them in the sense of civilly with organizations to help them find jobs or help train them, not on the taxpayer dollar, but through actual charity, which of course is not encouraged because of how much we spend on programs. But universal basic income and raising minimum wage is just no. I don't support either, and it causes the problem and it makes it worse. The problem it's seeking to fix, which it just neither. I don't support either.
And just for the public to know, if they have a question about the minimum wage or a living wage, I would refer to the Congressional Budget Office, which has looked into this 4 times since 2018. And you are correct, Trey. In each finding, it does increase the number of people who will be unemployed and the number of people who will be in poverty. In every example, whether it's a $15 minimum wage or higher, in fact, anything over $10. So you are correct in that finding, according to the Congressional Budget Office. But as I said, this is the discussion that's going on right now. So I wanted you to have a chance to answer that with your opinion. Mike, did you have another one? Because I got another question, totally different topic. Mike. Okay, let me move to, as I mentioned, diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially how that interacts with education. You've mentioned on your website you're very much involved in education. You have very strong feelings about that. You actually are the only one of the candidates, Republican candidates, who has taken the Ballotpedia. If people are not familiar with that, it's a neutral, independent source about elections, local and federal races. And you're the only one who actually answered their candidate questionnaire, which I found to be of interest. But in that, you're speaking about education. Well, diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory, intersectionality are all factors that are deeply ingrained in education in many states and sweeping the nation to some extent. How do you feel about that?
Well, a lot. Like I mentioned earlier, what we're seeing is so bad that I've looked into it a lot. Actually, I've considered starting a nonprofit that looks into this throughout the state. If I do, it's far off in the future. But I'm very aware of what's happening, and if I sat here and tried to go through all of it, it would take take a couple hours to go through the things that I've seen. But I've seen things. They are teaching classes on blasphemy in the public universities. I think that's insane. They're teaching children. They're showing them pornography. Just to be frank, it's very. It doesn't. You really can't even put it into words. It's so weird and just wrong. So I'm fully against it. I believe that we need to really look into solutions on that. We need to. It would take a constitutional amendment. It failed the last time we tried it in 2022. But currently in West Virginia, the way it works is the State Board of Education operates almost as a fourth branch of government. They are completely independent and really have no oversight. We tried to put underneath the legislature to where they could step in and oversee what's being taught in the schools, but unfortunately it failed constitutionally whenever we put it on the ballot. We need to revisit that. I believe we need to revisit some other solutions possibly, but overall, it's I also support full school choice, a voucher program. We have the Hope Scholarship, where a third of the money that would go to a public school can actually be used to pay for a child's tuition at private school, which actually normally covers the private school tuition because they are a lot better at spending money because it's actually their money, not someone else's, than the federal government or the state government. But there's a lot of solutions, but there's also a lot of problems in the public school system, especially when it relates to DEI. And it's a big thing to me. I mean, there are, of course, I said school choice. We need to look into that. We need to expand that. And we really need to make sure parents know and are able to hold their local school boards and teachers accountable. We need to look into the school board elections, which is something I've looked at. And we have decent ones in Greenbrier County, but we're still working on that as well. But overall, I mean, it's something that's going to be a long and hard fight. That is their stronghold, the Democrat Party, at least here in West Virginia. Nobody challenges it, and nobody really wants to, unfortunately. Personally, I believe that's wrong, and it's one of my number one issues. I believe we need to go in there and we need to stop them. It's not right, and it shouldn't be allowed, especially using our taxpayer dollars. I mean, and not allowing the parents to know what's being taught. It's all just very wrong.
Okay. Mike, I have two questions. One goes to gun control and another one which is about drugs. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
Well, yeah, actually I do, because he's been on taxes a couple different times.
Yep.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but West Virginia does have a state tax, correct?
I couldn't hear you on what tax you asked if we had.
A state income tax.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So there are multiple states that actually are able to operate and operate very effectively without a state income tax. Would you, and I know, again, you're a freshman, you would be a freshman, would you start working on the conversation to eliminate Virginia's income, or West Virginia's income tax?
Well, say West Virginia, absolutely no. It's unfortunately another complex issue. There's two taxes that really need to be eliminated, either one or the other, and maybe even both. The income tax is one I absolutely agree with eliminating. I agree with eliminating almost any tax, really, if we're running a subsidy like we are. But there's also one that is, I don't think very many other states have it. Really, actually, I think West Virginia is the only one on the East Coast. It's called the business and inventory tax. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but what it does is it taxes businesses on their unused inventory. And whenever I say inventory, that's very broad. There's an example that I know a delegate uses all the time. He has a farm, and he has brake pads that are old and worn out that have been laying on his shop shelf for the past decade. He gets taxed $2 every year on that. And there are county workers that are employed to go around and assess everything a business has and tax it. It's insane, and it prevents businesses from coming here. So you look at those two, absolutely one of them has to go, if not both. Unfortunately, the way our Constitution was set up, it would require a constitutional amendment to get rid of the business and inventory tax. We tried that and it failed. I believe it's worth trying again, but we need to do something. It's been discussed doing a rebate on that, where people pay it and then we have to send them the money back, which of course is just insane, but it would be better than nothing if that's what we have to do. But absolutely, I fully support that. Eliminating one or the other, hopefully both, if we can do it.
Trey, this is Frank. If do you have an assessment of how much money the state takes in because of the business and inventory tax versus how much they have to are forced to reimburse the business owners, and what it costs to operate that system?
Well, that system, it's awful. They fly drones over the property and use the pictures from the drones. It's so insane. I don't, and there's other small things with it too. It's a very, very complex system. There are equipment companies that will take their equipment and place it in Virginia on a parking lot on June 1st, and then bring it back in the state the next week, and they don't get taxed on it. It's a ridiculous system. I don't know exactly how much money they're bringing in off of it. I probably knew at one point, but it hasn't been in the front line of discussion for at least about a year and a half. So, but it isn't. We have a bigger surplus than what we would actually lose income wise than if we just cut it. We would still be able to run a surplus even if we cut it. So it's just insane.
Are there any exemptions to that business and inventory tax, like medical supplies or food or anything else like that, or is it does it matter? Is it an across the board tax?
Well, that's a good question. The specifics of it, I'm not very certain on. Like I said, it's very complex. I believe there are some exemptions, I believe. However, what they are, it isn't something that I am very familiar with. I know that it gets pretty crazy. I know that there are certain situations where people have been taxed $3 a year for their dog. So it gets real weird. But for the specifics of it, I don't have that memorized.
Yeah, that's a tax. Honestly, I've never heard of that, and that is absolutely ridiculous. That is beyond ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a big thing that prevents businesses from moving into the state. You want to go back to poverty. I mean, that's a big cause of it, and it was a Democrat policy, unfortunately, that was put in decades and decades ago. But
because as a businessman myself, as somebody who owned a business, when I think about my inventory, the things I would keep on hand, I was a general contractor for over 20 years. I kept a certain amount of plumbing supplies, electrical supplies, drywall, insulation, plywood, roofing materials, because you never know when you were going to get called out for a job, and you had to find something that you always had an emergency call Saturday night when everybody was closed, and you had to bring supplies there. If I was going to get taxed for the things that I'm keeping on hand for the things I might need for a job, that would make me not carry anything.
Right.
And would be having to tell customers, no, I'm going to have to wait till the store opens up in order to repair that hot water heater or to fix that faucet or that sink or that electrical problem that you got there. I wouldn't have been carrying anything. And if I did, you can be pretty damn well sure it wouldn't be kept at my place of business because I wouldn't be having people snooping around. Because if for you to come in to tax my business, I have to grant you access to my business. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're not a law enforcement agent and you don't have a warrant to come and search my property, you're violating my Fourth Amendment.
Right.
You can't just walk into my place of business and say, "Oh, we're here to look at your inventory." Go pound sand. I'm not letting you behind the counter. I'm not letting you into my truck. My truck isn't parked over here. Whatever it was. What if I keep my supplies at a residence's house because I bring stuff there and I don't know how much I'm going to need for the job until the job is done, and then I bill them accordingly, take back what's left. It just seems like a ridiculous system. And then you said that they're reimbursing people. So for you to institute a tax for what people have, you're paying for people to enforce that tax, collect that tax, account for that tax, spend that tax, and then have to now pay people to do the books to find out what people are entitled to get back from that tax. It sounds like there's a lot of
it opens up doors wide open for corruption.
Well, say not only that, but it sounds like you've got a tremendous amount of administrative fees that are being paid for something that it's like a losing proposition almost. You're paying, if you collect $1,000 from me in taxes and I wind up getting reimbursed 500 of it for it, and it costs you $600 to assess that I had to get 500 back, you lost the state $100.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You might have collected 400 from me, but it cost you 500 to do it.
Yeah. Just to clarify two things on that tax, the reimbursement is what's being considered because the legislature can't eliminate that tax for that constitutional amendment. It's not currently being done. It's been discussed. But you're absolutely right on what that reimbursement would do, the administrative cost of it. The other thing is, like I said, like you mentioned somewhat there, there are a lot of loopholes. A lot of people get around it in a lot of different ways. The car dealerships, the state fairgrounds are around Greenbrier County in the area that I'm from. The state fairgrounds is an exempt area, so the car dealerships in the area will park their cars on the state fairground on the assessment day, so that way they don't get taxed on their inventory. So it's a very interesting system that punishes small business owners that can't fight around those loopholes.
Let me ask you this: I don't know anything about West Virginia other than driving through it as quickly as I can. Does West Virginia produce or have distilleries of any kind?
In the sense of alcohol,
Yeah.
Yes. I'm not familiar with the laws on those though. I know that they do have them though. I know there are a couple locally. I'm not familiar with how it's regulated though.
Because if you know anything about alcohol, you know that takes a certain amount of time to distill. Whiskey just doesn't get made overnight. You've got to age this stuff, and any alcohol that you're making other than beer, that comes out pretty quick. But if you had any wineries or anybody that's producing spirits, you're talking about something that takes a long time to produce, to age, and do everything well. You can't really consider that inventory until it's ready to sell. So these people are paying taxes on something that may or may not actually turn out to be saleable, because you get a lot of times you have businesses that require production that takes time. At the end of it, you have a spoiled batch. Getting rid of it, you're taking a loss on the what it costs you. But if you're paying taxes on something that eventually you couldn't bring to market, it sounds like double, triple, and quadruple taxation.
Yeah, well, and you get that a lot in West Virginia, unfortunately, double and triple taxation. I'm not familiar with how they would handle that in that situation. The business inventory tax, it mainly hurts. It's not so much on perishable things like that. It really hurts on equipment mainly, construction companies, things like that, where they have a lot of things like that are worth a lot of money that they can hit really hard with that tax. That's the big thing, especially in manufacturing facilities, because I mean it's every piece of equipment in the facility or affiliated with the business. So it can really, of course, the actual specifics of the code, I'm not sure the exceptions, of course, but it's very harmful to those types of businesses.
Well, I didn't mean to ask questions to try and get at something that you may or may not know. What I was trying to get to is the fact that you may have the opportunity to get rid of this under the Equal Protection Act. If you have people that are being forced to pay taxes on goods and services that they provide that other people are not having to pay the taxes on, or vice versa, or you have people that are paying an inordinate amount of tax for something that they can't actually bring to market. Now you got people that are being taxed for something that the state can't justify that tax, and you're taxing somebody for something that's a net loss for them. So if you're not going to be able to apply that tax across the board in a uniform fashion, then you might have another argument for why you should be able to get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's just generally an unfair situation most of the time, and overall, it's not a very good idea to be taxing in that way anyway.
Well, it's not a good idea to be taxing anyhow, but that's beside the point.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, Frank. But let me ask, that is an interesting issue, and I think it should be taken up. And perhaps, Trey, when you get elected, you can bring that up, especially Frank's objection, which sounds very interesting to me, equal pay. That could be a reasoning to try and reverse that position.
So I come up with something good every now and then.
No doubt. But I wanted to ask, as I said, I had two questions for you, Trey. Obviously, I could ask many, many more, but I think there's two, and they're preeminent issues that you'll be dealing with.
I actually want to hold you up on that for just a second, Michael.
What's that? Go ahead.
Okay, so Trey, the reason I've been so quiet is I've actually been looking at the West Virginia state constitution.
Uh-oh.
And there are ways to get around this without an amendment to the Constitution. I would suggest that you read 10-1A of the Constitution of Article 10-1A of your Constitution, and also go down to and read 10-1C of your Constitution. Both of those give you several ways in which the legislature can enact laws that would basically repeal this out of the Constitution.
Yeah, I'll definitely look at that. Yet, of course, like I said, we've tried this before. The legislature has. It did go to the ballot, and it was a constitutional issue whenever they did it. I'll look into what you're saying. I can't really speak to it without going and reading it and really looking into it first. But there are some very smart people in the legislature, much smarter than me on issues like this. One of them's a guy named Senator Eric Tarr. He's a really good conservative, and he has been pushing that. And I've talked to him about it back whenever it was an issue, and it was my complete understanding, and obviously the way it played out, that it did require modifying the Constitution, and it did require it going to the ballot during the election of where it failed, unfortunately.
10-1C in particular is exemption from ad valorem taxation of certain personal property of inventory and warehouse goods, with phase into full exemption over a 5-year period. Okay, and this is basically the tax that you're talking about. Notwithstanding any other provisions of this Constitution, tangible personal property, which is moving, and it goes into a bunch of stuff, but there are ways that you can actually exempt business inventory from this taxation, using that section and also under the 10-1A taxation.
Okay. I will look into that, and it was at the very least a good question to ask next time I'm speaking to somebody who in the state who's really been looking at that fight to get that tax repealed. I appreciate you bringing it up. Again, it is interesting, but without getting more of a background into why they did it that specific way, I really can only really speculate on it.
Well, yeah, I understand that. I get that, but I just
take a word of advice
from your state constitution.
I said, take a word of advice from somebody who tends to see the worst in people. When you have somebody tell you that they need a constitutional amendment to fix something because something is too difficult to fix, usually because they don't want to fix it.
Often. Let me ask this, Trey. So 2 questions. Which one would you like first? Drugs, or would you like to deal with the Second Amendment? Which one?
Really, either one. Drugs would be fine.
Okay. So let's address that very quickly. It's real easy. You're going to love this. So, in part, it's also a question that comes from our audience, from Grace, as well as from me. I'm just trying to bring up on the screen right now. According to the CDC, and again, these numbers are coming from 2021, so please bear with this. It may not be up to date. But according to the CDC 2021, West Virginia was number 1 in terms of, as they rated, the, what is that? They called it the rate of deaths rate of overdose deaths in general, focusing mostly on fentanyl and opioids, obviously. But in terms of the number of deaths, well, then West Virginia's right about middle of the pack. Obviously, either way you want to look at this, this is significant and it is important. It is a concern for many people. Grace had mentioned that this has been something that's been affecting people in southern West Virginia for over a decade. What is your approach? Do you have an approach that you prefer or you think would be helpful if you are elected to address the overdoses either from opioids and or fentanyl?
Yeah, sure. You're absolutely right. It's a very sad issue. It's a very serious issue. There's a couple of different things that they've been working on, and I support at the legislative level. Number one is, you're absolutely right. You got it spot on there with the Southern West Virginia part. It's an issue that it affects the entire state, but in Southern West Virginia, it's very bad. Of course, that's where I'm from. And the county and the general area I'm in is actually it has a lot of issues with that. One of the solutions is we've been looking at getting a lot harder on the dealers and the people that are transporting it into the state, giving law enforcement more money to specifically create task force to go after that and making it a much harsher crime to hopefully make people think twice before they do it, dealing and transporting into the state. Then whenever you look at the actual user level, the people that are really the victims of it, especially the families, that's whenever you get into the public part of it, the charity part of it. I've supported personally some initiatives in the western part of the county to really help locally with the people that have been victims of that, become addicted, or unfortunately maybe their family members and the person that was addicted passed away. You really need to work with these people and try to help them, the addicts. And the only way it's going to happen is through community involvement. It's an issue that needs funded in a sense, but at the same time, it's not going to go away just because you throw money at it. It's absolutely the churches, especially at the church level. It's really showing the compassion of going in and helping these people. I think we need to look at any sort of way we can encourage that, while also going after the people that are causing this problem. You look at it, it's an immigration problem as well. That's where most of it's coming from, across the southern border. And then there's, of course, the other problems that we've had with pain medication. That's a lot of the deaths are fentanyl, and of course, that's coming across the southern border. But the pain medication people are getting addicted to, that's also another issue. We've been working on that, been going after some of the unjust things that happened there. But overall, it's a very hard issue that there's a lot to it, and it's not going to be. There's multiple different approaches that are going to have to be taken, both the law enforcement and then the actual helping the people that have been affected by it. Both to get back on their feet, find jobs, hopefully support them in their in beating that addiction. And absolutely, we need to do something at the state level, and we have, and we need to focus on it even more, funding these things and encouraging good programs that will help these people.
Okay, so just for clarification, it sounds like you're saying that your focus in particular is more towards the support and help of those addicts, not without additional focus on the border issue or immigration and enforcement of law. But the primary, if you had to rate those three, you're ranking supporting those individuals, helping them as being the primary part of your addressing the total issue. And then after that would come maybe in equal parts immigration and that inflow, as well as enforcement by law. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, of course, it's a society problem in the sense of the way some of these rural areas have been treated and been left. It's a bigger problem than just drugs. It's the it's the issue. It goes back into poverty, and it goes into really sad stuff where you have grandparents raising the children, things like that. And it's a much larger issue. And I believe that what you see where the drugs, it's more of a result of that bigger issue of not having really the proper community support in these areas, not taxpayer funded community support, but really the actual community of the churches and the nonprofits that maybe they may be taxpayer funded somewhat, but it's not necessarily a government program as much as it is the community helping these people that are in really bad situations. Of course, you go after the people causing this problem and taking advantage of these people, but you need to go in and help them and support them. I mean, they're victims, the vast majority of them, and you need to do whatever you can to get them off that and get them to be productive members of society.
Okay. I have something to piggyback off of that.
Mm-hmm.
Are you for or are you against the needle exchanges and safe places for them to use their drugs?
I don't have enough information on that, but just off hearing it, I'd probably be against it. I think that sounds like you're enabling them to continue in their use rather than taking them and trying to help them get off of it.
As a recovering addict, I think that is the worst thing that they have done for these people.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jan, for adding that question in. I'm trying to limit myself to broad base of questions for the voters, but yet trying to limit myself, especially the responses. You guys know I go crazy. I can hammer all kinds of stuff. But my final question would be in reference to gun control, the Second Amendment, which you've mentioned you're an advocate of the Second Amendment. But there's an issue that's been, again, crossing the entire nation, 18 states plus Washington, D.C. It's been attempted in West Virginia already. There was a temporary solution in 2021. Of course, I'm talking about red flag laws. Now, red flag laws have been coming back up. There is a resurgence of effort to reinstate them into all the remaining states of the United States. And we see a lot of pressure, especially now with things like the shootings in Colorado, which are not far from West Virginia, I'm sure you've heard about that. The dorm shootings, 2 individuals killed. You may have, did you hear about that, Trey?
It sounds familiar, but I don't think I actually read anything on it.
Okay. It's something that's been in the news, but like many of the school shootings and mass shootings, whenever they come up, we hear the plea or the statement that, hey, we're going to do something. Well, West Virginia first has said in 2021 definitively that red flag laws are not something that will be allowed. But there is a current throughout America to reinstate that. Do you support the red flag laws in any form? If there is a form of which you would support it on, what's your stipulation? If not, can you tell me why you do not support it?
Yeah, sure. Well, generally, I've not heard of a form of a red flag law that I would support. I believe that everybody has the right to own a firearm, especially with the Constitution, and protect themselves just generally. Of course, they try a lot of things to try to prevent gun ownership, and they try to blame a lot of things. To me, it seems the red flag law thing is just another attempt to try to get guns away from people. A lot of it seems to be, and I don't know, but it seems to be opening up the door to be able to slowly expand it more and more into where they can take just about everybody's guns for any reason they want. Whenever it comes down to it, generally, I believe more gun ownership makes people safer. Whenever you look at a lot of these mass shootings, a lot of the ones where it could have been much worse, but it wasn't as bad, is because someone, an actual regular, decent person had a firearm and was able to stop it. Taking guns away from people isn't going to solve that issue. It's a mental health issue, and focusing on guns is just, of course, they like to do it, but I don't see any sort of justification for it.
Okay. I did want to clarify that. By the way, I just wanted to point out, because we mentioned it earlier, and I know people may say, Mike, you were just being goofy. For people's knowledge, it was Barbara Lee, Representative Barbara Lee in California, who is seeking the Senate seat, who suggested a $50 minimum wage. So anyone who thought I was joking, thought I was just being facetious, no, it's serious. Representative Barbara Lee out of California, trying in her bid to win the Senate position from Adam Schiff. She's the one who suggested it. It isn't a joke. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. Thank you, Trey, for your points there.
And while we're on the subject, you guys gave me a perfect opportunity to segue into something I wanted to talk about real quick tonight. Trey, you mentioned about, good people being there at the right place at the right time in order to put down a mass shooting. Well, a couple of months back, we had our friend Raul Mendez on the program. Raul was at a family picnic on the 4th of July a couple of years ago, and somebody who attended the party decided they were going to take out a firearm and open fire on people. Raul was one of the first people that was shot. He was shot in the head and suffered a through and through injury, costing him his eye. Raul went down, and somehow during the course of the event, Raul summoned the courage to get up, retrieve his own firearm, and put 4 shots into the assailant's chest, putting an end to the fight. Raul is one of those good people that put himself in the line of fire to save other people. And with that, Raul had suffered massive injuries, massive amounts of debt. He's going to have injuries sustained the rest of his life that he's going to be suffering through this. And to get him through, they set up a GoFundMe page to try and help him out. But Raul's not the kind of guy who wants to take a handout. So Raul has established his own business called One Eye Defense, oddly enough. And on the screen is Raul's website. And he's now selling firearm accessories, different things that go along with it. He's got a plethora of different products, but one of the products that he has is the shirt that I'm wearing, and I'll stand up and you can see this. This is Raul's face on my chest, and it says One Eye Defense. And as you can see, this picture of Raul, and he's only got one eye. Shirts at $24.95 on his program. The only reason we're bringing up Raul is one of those. He's an American hero as far as I'm concerned. He's got the chutzpah that you'd want everybody to have in a time of need. He's a hero of mine. He's a friend to the program. And if anybody in the audience would like to help Raul out, as far as, like I said, he's not asking for a handout, but he would appreciate your patronage to his business. OneEyeDefense.com. So if you can click on there, if you need sites for your gun or magazines or various products, click on, give him a shot. He's got good prices, good shipping. I ordered this shirt 4 days ago, and here it is. And I'm wearing it today for the show. So just a shout out to our good buddy Raul. He's a great guy, and I know that if he lived in West Virginia, he'd be voting for you, Trey. So I just wanted to throw that out there for the guy. We love him on the program. We want to help him out.
Okay, I got one more thing to put Trey on the hot seat for.
He's doing a great job. He's answering our questions. So
he is. He's doing a great job with his answers.
And he's managed to keep the same straight face the entire time.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Okay, so West Virginia is ranked 2nd in the nation for receiving federal funding. Okay, or actually is the 2nd most federally dependent state in the nation. That's how I should actually say it. again, knowing that you're going to be a freshman, you don't have a lot of sway, but again, you can get the conversation started. Joe Manchin is bragging about securing $23 billion in federal funding for West Virginia. And West Virginia, as far as federal, being federally dependent, is second, only behind Alaska. What steps and what conversations are you going to start enacting with the federal government having a debt of over $330 trillion? What steps are you going to take to start getting the conversation to get West Virginia less dependent on federal funding?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, if you look at it, I don't, of course, I'm not an expert on where all the money goes whenever you break it down federal, state, and local. But I believe a lot of that federal funding, not just in West Virginia, but a lot of it is it's a lot of waste. It'll go to just really ridiculous stuff like green space projects in small communities, and it's the kind of stuff you hear about where they spend $10,000 on a bathroom or something. Just stuff that really it doesn't make any sense. Of course, a lot of it as well goes to fund stuff like the public schools, things like that. But whenever you're talking about the waste spending, I'm not interested at all in wasting taxpayer money, especially on stuff that's completely ridiculous. Locally, it goes in locally as well. There's a town here locally that spent, I don't even know how much money to open up a dog park, and there's something like maybe 2 people that use it in the whole town. It's just insane stuff. That stuff has to end. Whenever you look at how we fund that, a lot of, I think, our federal money goes to the public schools. I think I'm correct in saying that. And I'll be honest with you, our public schools waste a lot of money in West Virginia. Like I said earlier, the private schools, which provide a better education, are able to cover the cost of the students at 1/3. Whenever you look at how our current school voucher system sort of thing is set up there with the Hope Scholarship. It really, I mean, that's kind of the goal there: eliminate things that are completely useless and eliminate wasteful spending and things that are necessary. Whenever it comes to actually what you do to handle how much federal money we're receiving, there's a lot of different takes on that. Some of the stuff in the schools, it's attached to, if you take the federal money, you have to do certain things in the schools, teach certain things. I believe that maybe it's worth looking into seeing what those certain things are and maybe rejecting some of that money if we can, to not have to teach some of those things depending on what they are.
Well,
But it's a very, very large issue. Generally, you're absolutely right. The national debt is out of control, and we have to do something at the state level, but especially at the federal level.
I agree, and that's where you need to get states to become less dependent on federal funds. I know that the industry I work in is doing communication systems for for public safety agencies. So I see a lot of this grants and so forth. And every time there's federal funds distributed, there's also strings attached to those funds. And that's where you guys need to be looking into what those strings are.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And like I said, our schools are operating about with 3 times the funding of private schools, which do better. So there's certainly some room there to cut it. And I'm sure that's not the only place where we're spending too much and where we can cut out the federal funds.
Right. Okay. Okay. That's pretty much all I have. So I do appreciate you being on the show tonight, Trey. We've enjoyed having you, and thank you for answering our questions and tolerating us. I know we've thrown some curveballs at you.
Well, no,
Well,
I think the hardest one was probably the hot dog question. So,
well, I'm not done yet. I got 3 more questions for you. You ready?
yeah.
All right. Your everyday carry handgun. What's your preference?
Well, I don't personally carry. I'm actually, I
Oh,
know Jan mentioned it. I'm actually very young. I just turned 21 a few months ago.
well, that's a few months that you should have had your paperwork in, son.
You're probably right.
All right, we'll cut you some slack on that. All right, so you don't carry yet, but you intend to, correct?
Yes.
All right. At the time you get your carry gun, what at the moment do you think would be your preference?
Well, um,
Revolver,
never given that a lot of thought. But it probably something. I mean, certainly something. Nothing too complicated. Either 9mm or 45, something in that. As for what specifically, I mean, that's a great question. You've got me thinking on it now, at the very least.
I got one for you then, Trey. If you're not sure exactly what gun just yet, go check out Range Report, because Frank loves to get guns and shoot them and tell you all about them.
Yeah.
Well, that was the thing. I unlike the rest of my cohorts here, I appreciate what was it? Equity, inclusion, and what was it? Diversity.
Yeah.
As you can see by the wall behind me, I have a lot of equity tied up in what's on the wall. I've included just about every manufacturer because I believe in diversity. So I have, so we'll get you to the range. We'll get you to the range soon enough, and we'll put some different things in your hand, and we'll help you make a wise, educated choice in what kind of firearm suits you. All right. Second question. Should the ATF be relegated as a government agency or a convenience store?
Well, there's certainly a lot of these government agencies that really are not. Well, it should probably be completely cut. Whenever it comes to the ATF, I mean, you're right. It seems to be used specifically to attack the rights of citizens. And there's a couple of them out there that do similar things. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Certainly, depending on the next president, hopefully we see some action there.
All right. Here's my last question for you. I didn't realize that you were such a youthful young man. So this may or may not be in your wheelhouse, but it's a pressing question. Pete Rose, should we put him in the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the name.
Oh my God. That's the generational divide, ladies and gentlemen, between us old farts and the new young stallions coming up. Pete Rose played for the Cincinnati Reds. He has 4,500 hits. He was banned from baseball sometime in the late 80s, early 90s for gambling on baseball, while he was also a co-manager of the team. But his record is still unbreakable. Greatest hitter on who ever played the game. Call him Charlie Hustle. I believe they should, give the guy a break, put him in the Hall of Fame before he dies. So we're gonna have to get you schooled up on baseball history, firearm fundamentals, and everything else. But Trey, up until I found out you were 21 years old, I would have taken you for a much more elder, educated individual than someone of such youth and gravitas. So congratulations on being where you are. Very impressive for a young man. Very impressive.
And now you understand why I wanted him on the show.
Oh, I love
He's such a young man. He is so versed and understands things most people his age don't.
Yes. Definitely well spoken and well thought out.
All right, here's a question for you, Trey. Rolling Stones or the Beatles?
Well, I am familiar with the names. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the actual music.
The correct answer is neither. The
Well,
correct answer is neither.
Pink Floyd. The answer to that is Pink Floyd.
No, the correct answer is no. Pick an American band. Like Grand Funk Railroad. So something like that. Trey, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on here. Now, somebody had mentioned in the comment section that we should see about arranging a debate, a lively debate with you and the person that you're running against in this primary.
Jeff Caldwell.
Would you be open and willing to participate in such an event?
Well, I mean, yeah, of course, I'd always be willing to participate in a debate with him. I'd like to. There's been talks here locally to have an actual in-person one with people coming and attending in person. I'd like to see that. We'll have to see where that goes. Like I've said, I always like to say this, considering the situation of it. I highly respect him. Simply putting his name on the ballot and being willing to serve in that position. But he is, of course, in favor of some things that would normally be considered pretty radical on the Democrat side.
So right now, you would probably say, if you were an outsider looking in at the election, you would say that there is a stark difference between the candidacies.
Well, there's a massive difference. If, like I said, there's a couple things. He, again, highly respect him, but he supported Hillary Clinton in 2016. Yeah. He's called for the arrest of the things that from January 6th. He's called for arrest because of that. Claim that Donald Trump scares him. I don't see things the same way. So there's a pretty major difference there. However, well, really, I guess, put it this way, I'm always very open to a debate on those issues. I believe that the voters, especially considering it's a Republican primary, I believe they would be much more on my side on a lot of that. It's up to them at the end of the day what the Republican Party looks like and who their candidate is. However, I believe that I'm more conservative, much more traditional Republican, and hold to the Republican Party platform much more.
All right. Well, okay. In your race, just continue to draw the distinction between you and him, and they always say take a shot at your opponent's weaknesses, but you never know what your opponent thinks he's weak on. So I say take a shot at what he believes his strengths are. And if he's taking positions that he's proud of, that's where you go after him. That's how you draw the distinction between you and him. And you let the voters decide. Yeah,
and I believe that's the correct thing to do. My goal in this has been to present his record and his beliefs accurately and respectfully, and just let the voters decide. And generally, pretty much everything I've heard is the voters agree more with me. Locally, like I said, he was the former Democrat legislator, and he was defeated in 2020 by the Republican. So it's already well known what his positions are, but there are people that are Republicans that do that are more moderate, and that's okay. It's just up to the voters how they see that.
All right. So more or less, he's a political opportunist. He was ousted by his own party and then found himself someplace else that he could try and call home.
Well, I wouldn't say he was ousted by his own party. He was a member of the board of the state Democrat Party until the day he switched parties on his own of his own will. Nobody ousted him. He chose to switch parties without any sort of a backlash beforehand from his own party.
Let me add for the record, because there's always someone who's trying to play games with videos. We've seen it done in the past. That was not suggested by you about your opponent. That was something that Frank mentioned. That wasn't from you, Trey. That was from Frank.
Yeah.
So you're just responding to Frank's comment.
Yeah, if people want to take something out of context, review the whole damn show.
Well, they should, but you know how it is, man. That's why.
Yeah.
Just to make sure. And so they can't take it completely out of context. It's been stated clearly here. So
yeah.
Well, they'll still try.
Didn't mean to muddy up the waters.
No, it's okay. That's why I'm here. That's why I deal with the politics stuff.
No, that's fine. I've I've heard much worse comments talking to other people. That was pretty tame, really. So don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Hey, Jen, you okay over there?
She's coughing and saying yes, which
Okay.
doesn't
Just
look like a
checking.
yes.
Just want to make sure that we don't have to call the Flair Heimlich maneuver for you.
Yeah. Just coughing up a lung.
She's getting all choked up.
Yeah.
I don't know if Trey, you wanted to stick around because I know since we asked our questions, perhaps you may or may not want to comment or this or just listen to it.
Or is there anything specifically that you would like to talk about?
Good point.
Well, I'd encourage if there's anybody in the district to go look at my record, my opponents. Really, I know Jan didn't really ask any questions there. I know she's in the area and did bring up some things that really I'd like to hear more about, especially on the drug issue. If she'd like to address any of those, I'd be happy to speak about any of that.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is, pretty much what I asked you as far as, the needle exchange and the safe spaces for them to do their drugs. Because, again, as a recovering addict, I don't think our taxpayer money should be spent to support a habit.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. That is a blind spot in my information. I've never heard a lot of the proposals about that, so I'm glad I've heard your view on it. It matches up with my initial reaction of it seems to be supporting them whenever we need to be helping them.
I think as far as things for more local, what are your sites on what you want to do for Greenbrier?
Well, of course, being in the state legislature, one thing that I hear a lot locally politically is I hear a lot of candidates whenever they run for the state legislature make a lot of promises they can't keep. I'm not in the business of that personally. It might not be popular, but the state legislature really can't do a lot locally. It's more of the statewide overall policy. It can work on a couple things to try to get funding to very key areas in the county, but whenever it comes to local county policy, it's the county commission in West Virginia and some of the other courthouse positions. There's a lot of things I could say that I'd like to see. Some of the Wi-Fi stuff. I'm actually in a parking lot on my phone for this because of the Wi-Fi in Greenbrier County. I'm in an area where it's very poor, and I wanted to make sure I didn't have any sort of issues for you all on this. But as much as I'd like to say that I can do something about it, it'd be a promise that I couldn't keep if I made it. So I'm not going to make that. But I'm friends with the county commissioners here in the county, and it's something that whenever I talk to them and speak with them, there's things I can recommend, but there's nothing I can directly do.
Oh, okay. Dead air, guys. So
waiting on you.
Me. Well, I was going to say, if we're done with those questions, I wanted to also talk about, and this is something we had been talking about somewhat earlier with you, Trey, the Albany the Albany Supreme Court and their ruling in reference to embryos, in reference to in vitro fertilization, IVF. And it's been very popular over the last several days. Today, a lot of news came out about that as well. Many people are having a lot of contention about this. Trey, have you heard about this?
I want to say I seen something about it, but I didn't know what the person was referring to, the context of it. So the specifics of it, I'm not very familiar with.
Okay. So quick summary on it. Essentially, there was in vitro fertilization. I think we all know what that is. You have a woman and or a man have their eggs, their sperm. They take it out of their body. It is frozen to be used at a later date. In vitro fertilization is the combination of an egg and a sperm outside the body, which fertilizes that egg which then becomes obviously an embryo. It is frozen in that state and stored to later be either in a test tube or in the womb to give birth to a child. That's pretty straightforward. No one has any question about that. That's the science. That's what's done. Okay. So in Alabama, one of the in vitro fertilization facilities, which is storing some of the eggs and eggs of these embryos, they're storing them for their clients. They have contracts on that. Someone entered their facility, got possession of the eggs of 3 couples and destroyed them. Wanton, reckless destruction of other people's property. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky, because if you're looking at the eggs as just property, no problem. That everyone agrees on that. There is no dispute. And the in vitro fertilization facilities got sued because someone destroyed their property against the contract. But there's another element to it. There is also the lawsuit. In that same lawsuit, the couples said, and there's additional damage because those embryos were in fact potential babies and life. Therefore, that triggers the Alabama's regulations on protecting unborn children and the right to life by their state constitution and the state law, even law going back to 1872. The Supreme Court of Alabama said, yes, an embryo is life. Therefore, the penalty, the additional penalties for that destruction of that life is applied. The IVF, the in vitro fertilization companies have failed, and therefore they're going to pay a higher penalty. Now, this was a vote by the Supreme Court, which had 9 justices. 1 voted against this. 1 voted basically quoting scripture, the Bible, saying God's wrath for those who kill children, so on. So throwing out that one, because that's a violation of church and state, I think that's pretty straightforward. I think most people would agree with that. And even in polling, most people do, about 70% agree with that. So that still leaves 7 justices that said, according to the law, this was a violation. We are now seeing the argument on Twitter, social media, YouGov polling, and Democrats across the nation are using this issue and saying this is about abortion, this is about women's rights, that Republicans are evil, and that it's going to shut down in vitro fertilization, and everywhere women have no rights, vote Democrat. Literally, that is the argument being pushed by The Guardian, by Vox, by most of the left-leaning news media. I think this is insane. I think this is one of the most positive statements. This is a pro-life issue. They are punishing a company for not protecting life. They're not stopping anyone from having in vitro fertilization. They're saying when you do it, take care of your services. Make sure you're protecting those embryos so that someone can't randomly and wantonly destroy them. Does anyone disagree with me on that?
No. No. I think that if they are entrusted with that property, and actually it's not property, entrusted with those lives, that they need to be careful if they were with those lives being lost. Okay.
You got some wind there, Trey.
I also believe that the individual or individuals that did take those embryos should be charged with murder.
They haven't. There is, at this moment, there has been no charge against any individual for murder. this is a civil trial. And so even though they did quote criminal law, the justices, in justifying the protection of the children and the penalty, but there is no criminal case. It's just a civil one at this moment.
Yeah. And like I said, I think the individuals that did kill these embryos or murdered them should be held accountable for murder. And it should be first degree murder because it was a thought out, malicious event.
Well, I find it interesting that the Democrats compartmentalize, and somehow, if you're not born, you're not a human being, because they won't say baby, they say fetus, they say embryo, but you have to be an embryo to become a fetus, to become a baby that gets born.
Right.
There's no stop in that process. You don't have some other step outside of that. That's still human being. But they seem to think they compartmentalize it so that they can justify the abortion that they are in favor of. They're in favor of basically, this is my opinion. I consider it murder. Others may not. I'm pro-life. Others may not be, and that's fine. Other people can have their own opinion. But I find it interesting that they're trying to use this as a pro-abortion 2024 election campaign, that they are literally using this to try and win votes. And I think it's amazing.
Let's actually call it, okay, you say that they try to compartmentalize it, separate it from being, let's call it what it really is. They are dehumanizing the baby.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. That's what they do. Okay. And if we look at past events, okay, slavery, they dehumanized blacks. Holocaust, they dehumanized Jews. Okay. All of these events, these atrocities throughout history, started with dehumanizing. The dehumanization. And that is what they do in order to alleviate themselves of the guilt of murdering these babies.
Yeah, I think so. That it's a big issue. It's gaining a lot of traction. Literally, there was a YouGov poll on that today. And in fact, they admit in the YouGov poll that Democrats are using this as part of their campaign effort in 2024. Biden has made comment on it. Nikki Haley has made comment on it. A lot of people are very upset because it effectively is saying that life starts at conception without saying that. But I thought that was a big subject, and I think it's something we're going to see more of. It's going to be interesting. And of course, it's the Democrats, the progressives, shoving this into, it should be a state issue, but it's not. Now it's a national issue, and they're going to keep trying to make this a national issue when it's a state issue. It's crazy, in my opinion. But I know you guys had other things that you wanted to talk about. Go on, guys. Oh, dead air, of course. It's always dead air when I finish.
I'm actually thinking.
The judge overseeing Trump's Georgia campaign case donated to Fannie Willis' campaign prior to his appointment.
The entire Fannie, maybe this may be easier for you to comment on.
I'm just reading the AP as I'm scrolling by, listening to you guys dwell into a very deep, dark subject. After we had such lighthearted moments, you wanted to, bring murder and babies into the picture. way to go, fellas.
Okay, well, but the whole Fannie.
Well, Trey almost got out of here unscathed.
What?
He almost got out of here with a smile on his face, and you brought him down.
Not intentionally.
Well, that's it's an issue that it has to be addressed. I mean, there's just no way around it. It might not be a something that's fun to address, but it has to be addressed.
Well, it's going to be addressed, but right now we're still in the early stages of something like this. This is the first time that I could recall ever something like this being happened. So any which way the law is going to apply to this thing, either civilly or criminally, and however we look at it, we're going to have to wait to see what it happens, because it's going to be precedent setting one way or the other. And after that happens, then somebody will write propose a law to try and adjust it. So if it happens in the future, we'll know what we're doing. So right now, it's just going to be a point of opinion, not a point of policy.
No, they're trying to create law right now.
Yeah.
In the future about this.
Right. And until it's passed, it's still, it's up in the air.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, sure.
And besides, that was Alabama. Trey's trying to concentrate on West Virginia and the people of what's going on right there.
Yeah, but the world is going. I mean, we're talking about America. We're talking about the election. We're talking about things that are affecting the election. So it's fair. He's a well-rounded man.
I know, but remember, all politics is local.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except for me. It's
Yeah,
international.
What's your beverage of the evening there, Fass?
Coffee. All I drink is coffee.
That's all you drink.
Seriously. Yeah. I drink. That's it. I drink coffee. I probably go through 4 or 5 pots of coffee a day.
Yeah, that's about what I'm looking at here. So I get yelled at a lot.
I got no one to yell at me. When you're single, no one's going to yell about the bad food that I eat.
So Trey, when is primary day?
Yeah, sure. It'll be May 14th with early voting starting 2 weeks before that.
Right. What does the West Virginia early bird voting policy consist of? Is that write-in or mail-in or what?
It's solid, but not as solid as it should be, I guess, might be. Whenever you compare it to other states, at least. They do allow absentee, but you have to have a reason. I'm sure you all probably agree with me on some of the stuff that's happened in the past, especially with 2020. Absentee should probably be looked at again by the legislature.
There's a lot of questionable happenings now.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to file absentee voting in West Virginia in the district, how do they go about doing so?
They would request a ballot from the county clerk. Or actually, the ballot harvesting is allowed in the sense of somebody could take them a ballot, just a blank one. However, it's only 2 ballots per person. So if I wanted to do that, not saying that I will, but if I did, I could only do it with 2 ballots from 2 people. So there is a little bit of restriction on that.
Oh, so that's 2 ballots in totality, not per time.
Yeah. You could only they'll mark.
So
however they
if you
record
bring
it.
2 people of ballots, that's it. You're out of the loop. You can't do it for somebody else. So somebody else will get to step up and do it.
Yeah.
All right,
So
good.
ballot,
Well,
that's
at least
ballot
that's
harvesting.
one. At least that's one measure. Because most of your retirement homes and cemeteries have more than 2 people in them.
Yeah.
So
You're absolutely right.
Good step in the right direction there. Now, as for you mentioned before, your campaign donations, do you have a method in which to collect donations for your campaign?
Well, I do. I do have a WinRed account set up. It's connected through my website. There's a donate link there at the top. I have my a mailing address, of course, as well. I've had some checks mailed for personal funding. What I'm doing, I'm really just going out and talking to a lot of the people I know. I have a pretty large list of contacts, and that's just keeping it simple, not doing anything real crazy.
All right. Now, where do people go and find?
Yeah, I believe I'm looking at it pulled up on the screen there on my website. There's a donate button in the top right hand corner there, a big red button.
So right under where our banner is on the screen right now, that's the donate button right there. All right, cool. All right, so and that
Trey, are
and
you going to be at the GOP thing in Rupert on the 29th?
Yes, I will be.
Okay.
Why don't you
all right, now,
tell us
what is
more
that
about some of the
website?
events that you're going to be attending?
Yeah, sure. Of course, it's a small community, so whenever you're looking at events, especially with it being in the winter time right now, yeah, there's not a lot, unfortunately. But I do have a calendar. I'm looking at community dinners, things like that, to support local churches. Anything really, even if there's not a lot of people there, if it's a good opportunity to go support the community, at the very least, I can do that. But as for big events, there really aren't a lot of big events planned from now to the election throughout the county. Might have a campaign event. I've already had one. I might have another one up in the small portion of Pocahontas County that I have. But really, just not a lot of events wise. I'm gonna probably do a lot more door knocking to reach people.
Okay.
All right, now is your campaign accepting any volunteer workers to come in and give you guys a hand as far as canvassing and getting the message out? And if so, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I have had a lot of people approach me. I have a list I'm keeping. Really, I've got enough to the point of where I'm starting to have to sit down and say, okay, I have enough volunteers. I certainly could use more, but it's in a good position. There's a spot on my website, I believe, where people could fill out a thing where it's just on the website if you want to volunteer, name, email, phone number, and then what you're willing to do. As for those volunteers, of course, door knocking, phone calls, putting out signs, things like that. But I've been very, there have been people that have been putting into my life every time, and then of course even in the campaign where a lot of it's already covered, thankfully. But there's always a place for somebody. I just have to find it. But I'm very thankful. I've got a couple dozen volunteers already, but always looking for more.
Hey, cool. Now, do you have any public events planned where it's you'll like meet the candidate, greet the candidate, kind of standalone days where you get to go and talk to the people, or they can
Yeah,
come and talk to you?
yeah. Like I said, I'm going to plan one in Pocahontas County eventually. I had one a few weeks ago in the main Lewisburg, the big town in the district with Derek Evans. I might plan another one other than the Pocahontas one, but really, it's such a spread out and rural area that it's normally better just to go meet them in person at their house. But it is something absolutely I'm going to do. Just it's not going to be a focus.
Right, and what county is it again that you're in?
Greenbrier, the eastern part of Greenbrier, and a very small part of Pocahontas County. Both of those are on the Virginia state line, down there really far south. So it's a decent sized district, and then they kind of cut it up a little weird. But it's basically parts of two different counties, Greenbrier and Pocahontas.
All right,
Hey, Trey.
now if
Oh.
if I'm not mistaken, your county encompasses the Greenbrier Hotel, correct?
It does. It does. It's actually in my district. There in White Sulphur Springs, which is where I'm from, actually.
Oh, very
I
cool.
was
Yeah, the Greenbrier, if people don't know what the Greenbrier was, the Greenbrier at one point during the 1940s and 50s was America's largest hotel, nestled in the West Virginia mountains. And the history and secret to the Greenbrier Hotel was that it was a fallout shelter that was designed to facilitate the relocation of the President of the United States, all the Senate, and all the Congress, so that if in the event of a nuclear winter, we would still retain a functioning government. The Greenbrier was able to facilitate and house over 2,000 politicians and staff for up to a year underground. And that was a great secret of the American government until somewhere in the late 1980s when it was finally revealed that we had billions of dollars spent for the Hotel Greenbrier, and now it's a tourist attraction. And if anybody's in the area, they would like to, you know, stop by, make a donation to Trey Ewing's campaign, and then go on a little tour of the Greenbrier Hotel. Go look him up. I'm sure Trey knows where he is and can point you in the right direction. How's that for an unsolicited commercial?
Yeah.
This is why I'm the cornucopia of useless information.
Yeah. Well, it's a very interesting
I
story.
retain the government secrets.
Actually, that brings up a great question for me.
Oh, because I have a dumb one.
Briar, and who owns the Greenbrier, and the trouble that the man who owns the Greenbrier is in. Trey, on a state level, what can we do to make sure that when a candidate or a sitting governor owes back taxes, should they be allowed to run for the Senate?
Well, of course, it's a good thing to bring up, but whenever you start bringing up preventing people from running for public office, even if they do owe taxes, it is it can be complex. Generally speaking, I'd say you want to not limit people from running for public office if they feel that's something they want to do, and they feel it's important to them. However, of course, I believe at the same time the public has an equal civic duty to look into who they're voting for and say, well, is that really someone that I want to vote for? And I think that can be applied to any race.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. Not to stop them, but to disclose, full disclosure. If you're in debt to the state and you want a state job, you should at least mention that to people. I think that's basically your point there, Jan. Am I right?
Well, it's so well known here in the state of West Virginia with this man, what his coal company owes, what he personally I mean, they just put his helicopter up for auction. They are selling it's been put on hold right now, but they're selling a portion of the Greenbrier.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a pretty bad situation.
It's a very bad, and this man is running for Joe Manchin's seat.
Well, we also need to remember refusing to pay taxes is our first redress of grievances.
If it's a grievance. Okay. It could just be avoided.
So, I mean, he does have, maybe he's running the office because he thinks his taxes are excessive, and that's why he hasn't paid them, and that's why he's running for office.
What's the name of the person we're talking about?
When you are finding ways to disqualify people, there's always a way to disqualify somebody. Okay.
Well, I totally understand from the constitutional point from listening to you for a long time, Michael, that you just can't kick somebody off. But I think that everything that I've learned in the time that I've lived here, I do think that there should be stipulations, because we have too many people in high places that don't pay their bills, and then they raise our taxes, or they cut programs from us, or they cut and they get off scot-free.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the voter's choice, regardless of what that individual has done or not done. At the end of the day, it is the voter's choice.
As long as it's been disclosed to them previously. Mm-hmm. Have to disclose it. Have to tell.
Right. Now, it should be known. Okay. And that's where the media comes in. Okay. I mean, and people need to inform themselves. They need to inform themselves about who they're voting for. That's on the voter. And if they don't do that, that's on them. Not on anybody else.
That's why we had Trey on today. People are being informed. They get to. We covered a huge swath of questions. They can't say they weren't informed about a lot of things that matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that, of course, that situation there, it it is bad, and I think you're absolutely right. Just things like that, they need to be disclosed, and I think that's the big issue you run into is voters that, for whatever reason, don't have the information they need to make a proper decision. I think that's the real issue, and this is just one of the outcomes of that.
Yeah, that's a shame. I hate when I see that happening because that leads to other problems down the line when things aren't disclosed. Transparency is critical.
Mm-hmm. Yes, transparency absolutely is. Okay, and we need, and right now we're not getting transparency that we need at all levels of government.
Yep.
At any level. I can't think of a government agency that does have any transparency.
Right. So I did see something about a bill that was proposed to basically eliminate 120,000 FBI agents and like 1,000 ATF agents.
But I don't want to hear any bills about eliminating agents. I want to hear bills about eliminating agencies, or at least the top 10 levels of that agency. You know, there's a line in the great movie The Untouchables by Sean Connery, who says, if you're concerned about getting a spoiled apple, don't go to the bucket. Go directly to the tree.
Mm-hmm.
The tree is where the fresh apples are. The guys who are in the field, the guys who are doing the work, the guys who are doing the investigations, the field agents, these are people that are not corrupted, most of them. These are people that are out there trying to do the job the best they can for the country they love. It's the people that got appointed to these positions through political favoritism. These are the people that are agenda-driven animals, and they all need to go. So if we're going to eliminate anything, anybody that's been appointed to a position has got to go. You know, that's it. If you're this president appointed you, that senator wrote your letter. No, you're out. You're out. You're all there because of an agenda. And every agency that's in there right now is, when I'm sitting there and I have to worry about the Securities and Exchange Commission worrying about what stocks I buy, because that company may or may not invest in firearms. And if I buy stocks in that company and that company invests in firearms, I get put on a watch list. This world is nuts. The country is nuts. The government is nuts. And quite frankly, if our founding fathers saw what this government looked like today, they would probably go back and say, hey, listen, let's revisit the Constitution and put a couple of extra points in there about what the government's not allowed to do, because these morons completely don't get it.
No, and that's honestly right there. You got it. They don't understand that the way the Constitution is written specifically details exactly what they are allowed to do. And they are not supposed to be exceeding what those things are.
Right. Well, that's why they're all lawyers, because they look at the language, they look at the intent, and then they try to find a back door based on today's grammar and today's vernacular, so they can try and make it look like it's constitutional, even though that's not what the framers had intended. That's why the founding fathers didn't want lawyers to represent the people. They wanted the citizen farmer. That was the quote that was used, that the citizen farmer is the person who should represent the people of the people, for the people, by the people, not the elite class, the ruling class. We fought a war to get away from that, and everybody in Washington right now might as well just be wearing a friggin' red coat. That's my shtick of the evening as we're at the 2 hour and 4 minute mark. So I'm gonna get the hell out of here tonight. I got some dogs I need to tend to. I got medication I have to take, and my head has to hit a pillow because I am exhausted. Listen, Trey, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here with us tonight. If there's anything we can do, if you'd ever like to join us back here on the channel, please reach out. Let us know. Shoot us off an email. Get us through Jan, whatever it is, and if we can figure out how to host a little debate between you and your
opponent.
Well, I can't say your opponent. Yeah, that would be the best word. I can't say counterpart because you're not counterpart. You look at a counterpunch, not counterpart. And it's late. But if there's anything we can do, please let us know. It was a pleasure to have you on the channel. You're an impressive young man, and we wish you luck in the race.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I've enjoyed it.
Well, and make sure
you wind us up, Frank.
Make sure you share the stream, Trey, so people can see it.
Yeah, I will be.
Michael, Jan, love you guys. Talk to you soon. And Trey, remember, subscribe to the Range Report and get some education on firearms. It'll be so good. All right, kids, I'm out of here. And remember, be safe, shoot straight. Catch you guys next week.
All right.
Night, Frank.
Night, Frank.
I got to take off too, guys. Trey,
We're going to go ahead and wrap things up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead and wrap it up, Mike.
Trey, again, thank you for being on the show tonight. We really enjoyed having you. Thank you for asking or answering all our questions and so forth. Want to thank everybody that's in the chat for participating in the chat. We do appreciate that. We weren't as responsive tonight on getting your comments and stuff posted like we normally do. And I apologize for that. We are here every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. One of these years I will learn how to talk.
Eventually. We'll get there.
Oh, excuse me. So like I was trying to say, we're here every Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. We do ask that you like, share, comment, and subscribe. Hit that bell icon so that you get notifications on whenever we are live. With that being said, please visit our website, l1f.us. Also, we are in our membership drive mode, looking for people to help us expand our reach. And the only way we can do that is by increasing our funding. So we do ask that you become a member of the Liberty First Foundation, and that will help us reach more people. And as we gain funding, it will allow us to be able to do a lot more with our outreach and also with our legal agendas that we are trying to move forward on as well. With that being said, we wish you all a great week, and we will see you next Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Thanks again, Trey.
Definitely. Thank you.